Hi everyone. Very happy to be joined by Alison Belsham tonight. Do you want to start off with an introduction to yourself and your books, please?
Yes, my name's Alison Belsham, and obviously I'm a crime writer. That makes sense with the crime writing group. I've been writing crime for the last 6 or 7 years, and I've had 7 books published now. I started with The Tattoo Thief, which led on to a series of 3 books. And more recently, I've got a new series out, which the first book came out in July, which was The Girls on Chalk Hill. And in June, and then in July The Girl's Last Cry came out, so 2 in very quick succession, and there'll be a 3rd book in that series coming out in November. So that's my writing.
Lovely. So I remember The Tattoo Thief coming out. You've also been at Bloody Scotland with Pitch Perfect.
Yes, that was how I originally started with the crime writing. So I entered Pitch Perfect in 2016, and I literally had just had an idea for a crime novel, and I'd never been to a crime writing festival. I hadn't written any of the novel, but I saw on Facebook something about the Pitch Perfect competition. And how Pitch Perfect works is that you submit a 100-word description of your novel, and then 7 people out of however many people submit it are chosen to go up to Stirling, to Bloody Scotland, and pitch their novel in front of a panel of agents and editors. So I entered this, I thought, oh, this will be a bit of fun, not thinking I'd get anywhere. And I forgot all about it. And then several weeks later, I got an email saying, would you like to come up to Stirling and pitch your novel? So, of course, I went, and I pitched the novel, which was quite a terrifying experience to get up in front of, as well as the panel, there was a large audience. It was in the ballroom of the Golden Lion in Stirling. And, this sort of terrifying experience. And much to my surprise, I won. And because I won Pitch Perfect, I got an agent, and then a little bit later, once I'd written more of the book, I got a publishing deal. And so it was just that chance thing that I saw the competition on Facebook, and that just sort of changed the whole track of my writing.
Bloody Scotland seems to be really good for helping authors get started. And
yes,
all types of authors as well.
Yeah, Pitch Perfect was it has an amazing reputation of people who go through the competition getting published. So there's people like David Bishop, who is now on the McIlvanney Prize list. Not Douglas Skelton, he wasn't Pitch Perfect, but Mark Leggett went through Pitch Perfect. He's on the McIlvanney Prize list. Kate Foster won a couple of years ago. So the competition seems to really nurture and bring on new crime writers, and they all have great success. So, and I'm really thankful for everything that came as a result of entering that competition. So I always go back and watch it every year, because I just, I love seeing the thing happen again for someone else.
We've got some hellos from Leslie, Patricia, Jane, and Sally. Leslie saying she loved the embalmer.
Thank you very much. That's the 3rd one in the Tattoo Thief series.
So I read Girls from Chalk Hill in preparation for this, and I kind of like that you had someone who'd been and studied profiling as part of the thing. Is that something that you're quite interested in? Or?
Yes, I mean it's a very sort of American thing that is, I think it's now being used here, but the whole sort of thing about the FBI, and they have this place in Virginia, Quantico, where they train FBI agents, and they have something called the Behavioral Science Unit, and they were the first people that really sort of came up with the theory that you could profile serial killers. And there are various things that a lot of serial killers have in common. So nearly all of them have been abused while they were children. They have sort of certain social patterns. There are certain things that they tend to do. They quite often are arsonists before they start attacking people, or they're cruel to animals. So they, and it means that when the police see someone who has a pattern of cruelty to animals or setting fires, they can start to predict that this person might go on to much worse crimes. So it's a really interesting field of study, and there are quite a lot of really interesting books about it. So I thought when I came to creating this new character, although I was writing a police procedural set in the UK, I thought I wanted to bring in some of this. And I thought what would be really good would be that this character could have been and studied with the FBI. I think it's not that unusual for people to go and study things with the real experts in different countries and so on. So I thought she could have spent some time out in Virginia studying with and also working with the FBI on cases. And I thought this would give her a really different background, a really much more interesting sort of insight into the killers that she's now chasing down in Kent.
Yeah, it was definitely quite an interesting start. I like things like Mindhunter and stuff that are based
Yeah,
on.
I mean, definitely that's so the TV series Mindhunter is based on the book written by the man who set up that behavioral science unit. So it's really, that is right from the horse's mouth, and it's such fascinating stuff.
Yeah, the original book is really good as well.
It is, yeah, brilliant book.
I think this is Patricia. I don't understand the comment. She says she loved. Is it a book about Afghanistan with your brother?
Yeah, so between the Tatoothi series and the new series, I wrote 2 books with my brother, and they are called Death in Kabul and Death in Helmand. So my brother lived in Afghanistan for 4 years in the early 2000s. And when I finished the Tatoothi series, I thought, what can I write that's a bit more interesting as a crime novel? And I thought, well, my brother obviously has this amazing first-hand experience of a place where people hardly get to go to. And even he was working out there in security, and it meant that he was actually living in the city and moving around the city. So unlike people who go out there with the army, who live on army bases and whatever, he was out there at a time just after the fall of the Taliban for the first time. And the country sort of opened up, and Westerners could actually live in the city and work in the city. So I suggested to him that we write a murder mystery set in Kabul, because it would be such a very different place. And our main character is a Scottish ex-police detective, ex-police DI, and he's out there training the Afghan police force. And when there's a brutal murder of a British soldier, they pull him onto the case. And of course, then he suddenly realizes he's in Afghanistan. He's got no access to forensic laboratories. They can do very basic sort of fingerprinting, but no DNA analysis or anything like that. And of course, the Afghan police work in a very different way than what he learned when he worked in the British police. So you got this huge clash of cultures, and these 2 characters, an Afghan policeman and a Scottish policeman, and they have to solve the murder. And it was a really fascinating book to write. And then we did a second one where he went down to Helmand, which is in the south of Afghanistan, where the poppy fields are. So I learned a huge amount about the country, which my brother was telling me, and I did a lot of reading for background research. And so we wrote these 2 books. Now I'm very proud of the books, but they're not the typical Afghanistan sort of political. There's nothing about the Taliban. It's just proper murder mysteries set within that very, very different place, very sort of alien place to us.
I'll have to look those up. I think it's really interesting when you can learn about a country that you don't really know a lot about.
Yeah,
I
mean, just learning sort of things like the food they ate. So they have this street snack called bolani, which are flatbreads, and they're cooked with some potato and spring onions and garlic, and literally you cook the flatbread, the raw dough, and put the filling in, and then cook them in a very, very hot frying pan. And I thought that they sound so delicious. My brother said it was just their go-to snack whenever they were out in the city. And so I actually tried cooking them, and they were absolutely delicious. So, you just learn all sorts of things when you do this sort of research for writing.
Yeah, it is genuinely fascinating. Sally has asked, she said she's read all of your books and thoroughly enjoyed all of them, but the Tattoo Thief series are her favourite. Will there be any more in the series? She loves the dynamic between Marnie and Francis.
There won't be any more in that series, I don't think. I mean, I would maybe like to resurrect them, but I've changed publishers, and publishers always want something new from you, a new series. So that series was with my old publisher, so I think it's unlikely that I'll get a chance to write about Francis and Marnie again, which is a real shame.
Who's your current publisher?
My current publisher is Bookouture.
When I was setting up the interviews for Bloody Scotland with Fiona, she was saying that you're organising your own festival as well.
Yes, so this is very different, and obviously everyone listening here are sort of big crime fans, but in Edinburgh I run something called the Edinburgh Writers Forum, and it's a professional development meeting for writers and networking and stuff. And what we've always heard from the writers who come to the meeting is that romance writers and women's fiction writers never get invited to book festivals. I mean, obviously there are a lot of crime writing festivals which are not open to them, but other festivals tend to be very literary and look down on romance. And so we've teamed up with the Edinburgh Bookshop, and we're starting a women's fiction festival in Edinburgh with first time this year, and it will be on October the 6th and 7th. And it's just for historical romance, rom-coms, feel-good fiction, book group fiction. We've got lots of fantastic authors lined up. We've got Jenny Colgan, we've got Sarah Sheridan, Kim Sherwood, Eva Verde, Millie Johnson. So lots of well-known writers in that area. And yeah, we're very excited about it. So hopefully some of the people who read crime also like reading romance and would like to come along.
I think there's a genuine crossover between genres. With a lot of people, I love romance books. Is there like an escapist fiction? So if I'm like wanting to properly switch off.
And I think people like to swap between them. I mean, most of the time, I read a lot of crime, but then I like to kind of pivot away to something else, because it can become too much if you only read one genre. So I think there are a lot of people who read lots of different genres. So
they can merge as well. There's an author in our group called Kelly Clayton, and she writes the books as, I think she's gone back to Kelly Clayton now, but she writes like Regency books, and there's romance in them, but there's also a crime.
Oh right, yes, yeah. I mean, that makes sense. I know.
But they're predominantly more on the romance end. She does write crime as well, but these are more. You would probably expect them to be more in the like women's fiction section than in the crime section.
Yeah.
That kind of crossover, and I absolutely adore them.
I mean, they say that nearly every book that's published has a crime. I mean, a lot of literary fiction also features a crime somehow, even if it's not a straightforward linear investigation. Crime, when a crime happens, it gives a good plot to any type of story. So you find crimes in every genre, really.
Jane said, is it only female writers?
It's not, actually. We've got one male writer this year, which is Mike Gale, who writes, I suppose you might say, romance and feel-good fiction. But we did want to make sure we included one male writer. Just, we are very open and inclusive. It's one day this year we've got one event on the Friday evening and then panels all day on the Saturday. But next year we want to have 2 days, and then we can broaden it even further. But we want to be completely inclusive. So although it's called a women's fiction festival, there is a male writer. We will be very happy to see men in the audience, and it's open to everyone. We want it to be absolutely inclusive.
It's hard work though, isn't it? We organised our own live kind of crime fiction event, obviously, because we're a crime book group last year, just a one-day one, and we're doing it again next year. there's a lot
It's
to do.
a lot of hard work. Yeah, I mean, I think, if we'd realised before we started, I don't know if we would have done it, because it's like taken over our lives completely, and we almost spend at the moment, because it's just a month to go, it's almost every waking hour sorting out things and, working out the logistics and so on. But we are very excited about it.
Once you've done it once, it does get a bit easier.
I think so. I mean, this year when we started out, we set up, we got charitable status for it. So that meant filling in all the forms for that and having to there's a lot of red tape involved in that. And then setting up the bank account seemed to be incredibly complicated when you think it should be quite simple. It took weeks and weeks, but those things are done now, and that means that next year we won't have to do them. So, and we started a little bit late with this, with just a few months to do it. And of course, now we know once this festival is done, we'll have a whole year till the next one. And so we'll be able to spread out the work a bit more.
I think it's interesting to go back to what you were saying about genres, because I don't know how you decide, or how bookshops decide what really fits into what genre, because sometimes you get books that are kind of close to the boundaries, aren't they, or across them.
Yes.
And where do they then fit?
I think that's hard. When you approach a publisher with a book, it's one of the first things they say is, what genre is this? Because if it doesn't sit neatly in a particular genre, then the bookshops find it very hard to put the book on the shelf. They don't know where to put it, and that puts publishers off taking books that are cross genre. So it has to it means that for a cross genre book, it has to be sort of even better. The bar is even higher, because there is this reluctance on the part of publishers to take them on, which seems silly, because people should write what they want, and readers probably enjoy books and don't really care what genre they fall into, or if they're strictly in one genre or another. But it's just the mechanism for selling books means that you have to kind of slot into a particular genre. So
I think it frustrates me, because some of my favorite authors and books are kind of cross genre.
I mean, yeah, it would be nice if the industry was a bit more relaxed about it. I think, because lots of people enjoy cross genre, as you were saying, like the crime and romance cross genre, and it's then the bookshop is saying, do we put it in crime? Do we put it in romance? And it shouldn't matter, but they have to put it somewhere, I suppose.
I think this is Patsy said that someone at Waterstone says that if he puts a book in the crime section, it'll sell better than if it goes into romance.
Really, I mean, that's interesting. I mean, crime was, for a long time, crime was a very dominant genre, and since COVID, romance is now outselling crime. I think because people want a bit more escapism and a bit more. They want to read things that are a bit lighter. I don't know whether how long that will last, or what will become the next best-selling genre, but and I expect it probably varies between bookshops as well, probably so.
So I wonder if that's also why there's so many crime festivals, because I think if you go to like literary festivals, talk to sort of crime authors who've been to things like Hay and done like panels there, it's not really looked upon in the same way, because that is just a generic kind of literature festival, and it's not really what they focus on. So it's not kind of, I mean, I'm trying to find the right words to say it. It's not like they're not given respect, but it's not as.
I think you're right. It is about, I think in the very literary festivals don't tend to have the genre end of crime. They have the more literary crime books, and the very literary festivals don't tend to have romance. But the genre fiction, the big main genres, crime and romance, are the most popular genres.
Oh dear, we've got frozen Alison. Let's hope it comes back. Oops, now I've lost her. Donna. Yeah, how was Tales on Trent, Donna? It looked really good. Did you get a lot of people there on Saturday? I didn't manage to go, but I was in Stoke the weekend before. So I'd be interested to know, because it is one that I'd like to go to eventually. Patsy, you're right, sci-fi is a new genre. Leslie will ask about the audiobooks when Alison comes back. Sally likes a bit of crime and romance, like I do. Stabby romance sounds really interesting. There you go, you're back.
I'm back. Sorry, I lost connection, but I seem to be back. Fingers crossed.
You're right, it happens when you're online. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
You got asked if your Bookouture books are on audiobook.
They are, yes. Yeah, they are available on audio, and I can't remember the name of the lady who's read them, but there have been some really lovely reviews saying that the narrator is absolutely brilliant, and I can vouch for that. She's fantastic. So I would definitely encourage people, if they like audiobooks, to go for them.
Did you get to choose your narrator?
They suggested the narrator. Of course, I wouldn't know who to choose because I don't know lots of different narrators. So Bookouture suggested a narrator and sent me a snippet of her reading from an earlier book that she's done. And then I went back and said, oh dear, she sounds fantastic. So I don't know what would have happened if I didn't say that, but she was brilliant. So that was fine. It all worked well.
It might have been Jane. She said she had an ARC audio of the Bookouture books, I think, and said they were fabulous.
I mean, it's I'm really pleased with the results of the audiobooks. So they're great.
So how many in the current series? I started with Girls on Chalk Hill.
Yeah, the Girls on Chalk Hill is the first, and then the Girls Last Cry, and they're both out. And then in November, the third book, The Innocent Angels, will come out, and then hopefully it will go on from there. We'll see how it goes.
Do you have kind of a number in your head of numbers of books you want to write in that series?
No, I'm just happy to kind of go with the flow and see what happens.
Are you tempted to write any standalones at all? Because it sounds like you've done kind of, even with your brother, like a duo of books. So
yeah, that was duo. Yeah, I am actually. I'd be quite interested because at the moment, most of the books I've written are police procedurals, and of course they do lend themselves very well to series. But I'd quite like to try some standalones, some sort of psychological thrillers, and see how those go. So I've always got so many ideas and so many books I want to write, and of course it takes so long to write a book that it's just when I can fit them in.
How long does it take you to write a book?
Takes me about 4 or 5 months to do the first draft, but before I start that, I do a lot of planning. I plan out the story in quite a lot of detail before I start writing. So with the Bookouture books, I've been doing 2 a year, and that's about the maximum I could do. I think that's quite exhausting to do.
You've got people talking about genres. Apparently, Donna was at a multi-author event on Saturday. She said someone said they wrote stabby romance.
Yeah, that's a nice term, as someone says, stabby romance. That's I haven't read much of that, so I don't know too much about it. But
it's got you interested, hasn't it? And someone said cli-fi is a new genre.
Sorry, crime-fi?
No, cli-fi. It's like
cli-fi. What's that?
Climate fiction. So things like Greg Moss's Coming Darkness.
Oh, and also maybe like Rachella Teller, who did Thirsty Animals, and the other one, The Pharmacist. So it's the sort of climate dystopia type of thing is that, I think.
Yeah, I think so. Like climate having a real impact. Peter May's last one as well would probably fit into that. I'm trying to think of the title. I can't think of the title of it off the top of my head. But that's definitely got climate kind of impact.
I think we'll see a lot more of that because we're seeing a lot more of the impact of climate change, aren't we? And so I think that people will find things to write about there, all the different effects that the climate can have on us. It's all great inspiration for and in all different genres. You could have crime books written with links to climate issues. but again, just sort of human drama and survival books and dystopian stories. So
I think also you wonder if like people, because it is something real and happening to us, if that would maybe make people not want to talk about it, because there was quite a lot like after the pandemic when we were interviewing people, of people being like, we're not going to write about that.
That's true. Yeah, I mean, it's I think that there'll be people who will embrace those stories, and there'll be people who will be like, no, I don't want, it's too close to the bone with what's actually happening in the world. So
I think fiction, like as you said, people maybe buy romance to escape, but I think also people can buy books as a way of processing things.
yeah, I mean, I think with crime, a lot of people read crime to kind of put the world in order, and because you always get the outcome in most crime novels where the villain gets their comeuppance, it allows people to kind of explore those issues, knowing that it's a safe space to read about those things. So people have so many different reasons for reading books and for choosing the books that people choose, and it's always quite interesting to why people choose certain books to read.
Yeah, I think so too. Have you got any panels or anything at Bloody Scotland? Are you doing any events there? Or
I've got a panel at Bloody Scotland. It's called Driving Forces, and it's about central characters that have very sort of different backgrounds. So I'm going to be talking about the new detective Lexi Bennett and her background with the working in America, learning about serial killers, but also prior to that, she was herself a target of a serial killer when she was a teenager with her two sisters. So she's got this sort of very her background, makes her a complete expert at what she does, because not only has she studied how serial killers work and how they think, but she's also experienced, she has this huge empathy with the victims because she's also been through this sort of brush with a serial killer in her own life. So that's why I'm on that panel. And then the other two people on the panel are Luca Veste and Armand Allange, who they've both written books with obviously very sort of different types of central characters. So I think it should be a really interesting panel, and we should have some really interesting discussions. And then, of course, I'll be obviously going to Pitch Perfect. And what's really lovely now is I now help with the selection on Pitch Perfect. Having won Pitch Perfect all those years ago, I now help with the selection. So I get to read the written entries from which the people are chosen, and sort of give my opinion on the written entries. And so it's kind of like come full circle now. So I'll be watching with interest and seeing, how it translates from the little written pitch to the spoken pitch. And, pitching is it's so difficult to pitch if you've never pitched before. And so I'd be there to kind of cheer on the people, who encourage everyone who's entered, and then see who wins, which is always so exciting.
Yeah, I was reading the list before we went live. It was just announced today.
Yes, yeah, it's just been announced. There's the 8 people who will be pitching, and I would say good luck to all of them. And my advice to any of them, they're probably not listening now, but if anyone was, my advice is practice some more, because the more familiar you are with your pitch, the more easily it will flow, and you'll be able to look up and make eye contact with people in the panel if you know your pitch very well, rather than having to sort of be glued to the paper in front of you. So it's such a great event, and I'd encourage anyone who's coming to Bloody Scotland to come and watch Pitch Perfect, because it's so interesting to see these new writers who in a couple of years you'll be seeing their books in the bookshops.
True. I think also, going back to the organising festivals, I think one of the hardest things to do is come up with themes for panels.
I think that's true. Yes. I think, to work out and to thread together certain authors where their books might be very different, but you find a common thread that everyone can talk about, and that's what a good programmer does very well. I mean, we have on our romance festival, we've got one panel which is called Witcherature, which is this new sort of lots of books coming out at the moment about witches. And so we've got two writers, Anya Bergman and Stacey Thomas, who've written books about witches. And so I think that should be a really interesting discussion.
I would be all over that panel if I lived in Edinburgh. I love books about witches. Donna's agreeing with me because she organises events. When you actually see the lineup for our event, Donna, there's one I'm particularly proud of inventing. See if you can guess what it is. I'm not telling people yet what we've done. So we've not announced our lineup yet because it's not complete.
Right.
I'm up with a panel and it is all agreed who's coming on it, and I'm very proud of what I've invented. I think I'm
when are we going to find out what it is then?
I'm quite amused with myself, if you know what I mean. I'm like, yeah, that was a good one. But I can't, because I've not told it yet, so I can't tell everyone yet.
When will your programme be announced?
As soon as I've got everybody confirmed.
Mm-hmm. And when is the event itself happening?
It's in June next year. So
June next year. So you got a bit of time to line everything up finally and get it all in place. So
yeah, but you know, sometimes when you come up with one like Witcherature, you're like, yeah, that was a good one. I've come up with a
we were just so once we started to get the panels lined up, and we were so desperate to tell people, it's like, no, we can't tell them yet until everything is finalized. And you are desperate to kind of shout out, hey, we've got this person coming, and that's really great, really exciting, and you have to keep quiet till that moment when everything's sorted.
Yeah, my poor husband probably gets really bored of it because he'll get like all of the kind of, oh, I've got this sorted.
Yeah, so he listens to you talking about it for weeks and weeks and weeks before it can even go public. Yes.
Yeah, he's probably very bored with the whole thing by now. Going back, so we've talked about the new series, the Tattoo. What can you tell us about the Tattoo Thief series? So I've not read that. So what?
Oh, right. So that started out. The first book in the series, The Tattoo Thief, is about a serial killer who literally steals tattoos off his victims' bodies. And that came about because in 2016, I had a sleeve tattoo done. And the very first night, after the very first session of tattooing, I was lying in bed and I couldn't sleep because I was sort of quite excited and quite pleased with myself for having got this tattoo started. And I thought to myself, I've got my tattoo now and no one can take it from me. And then, of course, the little writer voice in my head said, yeah, but what if someone did take your tattoo? And it was like, ding, that's a crime novel. And so I developed this character, this serial killer who steals the tattoos off his victims. And he stalks people and chooses, he takes them and cures the skin to make it like leather so he can keep them as works of art. So he's going after people who have works by particular tattoo artists, the very best tattoo artists in the world. And I started, so that was the crime, and I thought, right, I've got to have a detective that can go up against this absolutely demonic killer. And so I created Francis Sullivan, who is a DI on his very first case. He's very, very young. Unlike all of the middle-aged, divorced, whiskey-swilling DIs, he's on his first case. He's got a new team who don't really want him because he's passed over. His sergeant thought he was going to become the DI, didn't get the job. This new young kid is put in charge of him. And Francis doesn't drink. He's very religious. He knows nothing about tattoos. And then he's thrown into this world where there's a mad killer. It's set in Brighton, where there are a lot of tattoo parlors and there's a big tattoo convention. And there's a whole kind of tattooing community. And he has to go into this world to find this killer. And he gets help from a woman called Marnie, who's a tattoo artist who's quite a bit older than him. And she has a dodgy ex-husband, and she has a teenage son and a badly behaved dog, and her life is absolutely chaotic. And so they're like chalk and cheese, and they have to go after the killer. And that's the first of 3 books in which they team up, and the murders all have a tattooing link. So the second book is called Her Last Breath, and it's about a killer that puts poison in the tattooing. And oh, sorry, that's my Siri just chipping into the conversation. Very bizarre. So yeah, so he a tattoo artist who uses poison ink on people as a way of killing them, and again they have to find out who it is. And then the final one in the series is called The Embalmer, and it's about a killer who is embalming people and going back to the ancient Egyptian religion where they would mummify people and cut their bodies up and put their organs into little jars, and sort of Egyptian symbols are tattooed on the bodies and stuff. So again, it's got that tattooing link to it, and it's another gruesome crime in Brighton.
Patsy said they're taking an account of tattoos at Dundee University. It was after the 2004 tsunami. They said you can register your tattoo, so if your body's found, they know who you are.
Oh, really? That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, that. Yeah, I mean, I've seen, because you mentioned Sue Black, and I went to Sue Black's book launch, and she's done work in, like, she went out after the tsunami, and she also went out to Kosovo to look at the mass graves from the war and stuff. And she's a fascinating woman, and anyone who enjoys crime would really like her books, because she has such an interesting, she's one of the premier forensic scientists in the country, and so that's very interesting to hear that they're like registering people's tattoos so they can identify bodies.
I went to a forensics event at Harrogate Crime Festival last year, and they said that actually once you're tattooed, your lymph nodes get some of the ink in them. So even if a killer cuts away the tattoo, in your body, they can find like traces of all the inks and things that we use.
Yes, your lymph glands apparently take on the blue or the black ink if you've had a tattoo. So
yeah, I thought that was really interesting. So it's like,
it is
like one of those things where you think you've erased the evidence and you actually haven't.
No, like, that's it. So yeah, so I mean, like in this book where the killer is stealing the tattoos, they would still know that it was a body that had tattoos on it from that reason alone. Yes, but also it's a bit of a giveaway because there'd be a great big kind of missing patch of the skin where he'd cut the tattoo away. So
yeah, exactly. It's me. Yeah. I like your one about embalming as well. I think, have you ever seen the like the German guy who does that, like does the artwork?
Oh, does the body stuff? Oh no, I think that's so.
Looks like a serial killer when you see him.
I know, he looks really creepy, and I'd never been to one of those exhibitions because they look just too gross. Actually, I mean, I know I write some really gruesome stuff, but I'm quite a wimp about sort of actually seeing it, so I wouldn't want to.
They're absolutely fine, actually. I have been to one.
Oh, right.
I will qualify this with I studied biology, so I'm a bit less bothered about kind of things like that anyway. But you can't tell, there's like no scientific kind of smell of anything. It is
because he
like
puts them in, encases them in plastic, doesn't he?
Yeah, he like puts plastic in, and then some of the bodies that you'll see will just be like blood vessels and things, but you don't, because it's so, like I said, there's no like smells or anything with it, so it does feel like an art exhibit.
Yeah, so as far, although they're real, they could in fact be models of the things, couldn't they? Because it's not like they're real, and they're not, they're preserved perfectly, aren't they? So
but yeah, so you can, I think it's like not as bad because of that. We went and took my nephew, and he was 15 when we took him, and he was completely fine.
Oh yeah, I mean, like, kids are fascinated by that sort of stuff, aren't they? So
who's just said it? So yeah, Jane has said it's amazing.
Yeah, Yeah, I don't know. Is it still on? Can people still go and see it, or is it?
Yeah, I think it travels around and he gets a lot of people who donate stuff to him. He also did a really good series on Channel 4, but years and years ago, where he did like kind of almost like a post-mortem live and talked you through different systems of the body.
Yeah. So a bit more realistic than Silent Witness then.
Maybe. I mean, it wasn't like post-mortem, if you know what I mean, trying to work out what happened, but it was like teaching you about the body systems.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's interesting stuff.
Yeah, that's James adding in. But yeah, Steve Black, I think they're all interesting. So Professor Angela Geller at a literature festival recently, she's also really when you start delving into books of people who are real experts, I think they're fascinating.
I mean, it's essential reading for crime writers, those sorts of books. So they are really fascinating. And like I was saying earlier, you know, reading about all the work that various people have done with the serial killers and stuff, it's fascinating reading. So,
do you have any experts that you call on to help when you're doing your books?
Not regularly. I mean, I sometimes know a retired police superintendent who I can ask questions, or I show him the book sometimes. And then, like in my most recent one, the one that's coming out in November, the killing is set on a vineyard. So I arranged to go to an English vineyard. So in this book, it's set in Kent. So I went to an English vineyard for a day and we went round and saw how the wine was produced and how the vines are growing and learnt all about it, so that I could give quite an authentic feel to the book. So I do quite a bit of location research and talk to people in various locations and various different jobs and stuff like that. So it's always that's sort of the most interesting part of doing the writing, is actually when you get to go on a field trip to look at something. I went to I did a tour of the Brighton sewers, because the second book in the Two Thief series, there's the big finale all happens underground in the sewers, and you can tour around the Victorian sewers in Brighton. And so I had this reason to go into the sewers, was because I was writing quite a lot of scenes down there, but there were 20 people on the tour, and I had to think to myself, why are the 19 other people going to look at the sewers? Because it's really not very pleasant.
Interesting. I mean, I guess if you're going to go and tour venues, the vineyard would be the better.
Yeah, the vineyard was a lot more pleasant than the sewers.
Did you get to sample the wines as well?
Yep, we did. Yeah, we got the full wine tasting experience at the end, and even bought a few bottles to take home just to kind of stay in the mood with it. So it's all good.
And just sound good. Because there's not many vineyards in the UK, is there? There's not.
Well, funny enough, there seem to be more and more. I think it's really taken off in recent years. There seem to be quite a lot, but a lot of them, the wine is very expensive. So, you know, English wine used to have a bad reputation, and now suddenly it's become much smarter. And the one that we went to see did sparkling wine, and it had won some prizes against some of the top champagne houses in France. This British sparkling wine had won some prizes, and it was made, you know, we tasted it and it was absolutely lovely. So they're doing much better than they used to. Their reputation is really coming up.
That's good. How did they feel about? Well, I guess they weren't immortalised if you moved it to Kent.
Yeah, I mean, it was different. So the one I went to was in Hampshire, and so I did a fictitious vineyard that's in Kent with a different name. So it's not like anyone would say immediately that it's that vineyard where these murders happened. You know, mine is totally fictitious. But I hope that they'll read it and enjoy it and get some fun out of it, really.
There's probably a really interesting crime novel written around like vineyards. You know, like the bodies are like preserved.
Bodies in the vineyards, and you know, they all have these underground cellars where it's full of barrels of wine and crates and crates of bottles of wine and stuff like that. And yeah, I was trying.
You could hide so many bodies in those barrels, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could actually. Yes. So, you know, so it was it made a really interesting location to write about, and I do always try and find quite interesting locations for the bodies to be found, and different places. Like the one that you read, The Girls on Chalk Hill, they were found lying on the giant chalk carving up on the hill, and I just thought, well, that'd be really stunning because the white chalk and the red blood, you know, it makes a very arresting image. So always try and make the locations something a bit special.
And those like chalk carvings are always quite kind of, I don't know, I always think they're quite eerie.
Yeah, I think so. And I used a real chalk carving that really exists. So, you know, if you're ever in Kent, you can drive past it and look at it and think, that's the scene where the murder happened. And
Sounds good. What have you been reading this year that you've really enjoyed?
So I read a non-fiction book called Empire of Pain, which is about the opioid crisis in America. And I've just started reading a book by Barbara Kingsolver called Demon Copperhead, which is also about the opioid crisis. The two books kind of sit together quite nicely. And that's really interesting. There's been quite a few TV series recently. I don't know if anyone's watched them. There was a series on Netflix called Painkiller. It's a fascinating story of this family, the Sacklers, who created this drug that was so addictive, and it's caused so many problems in America with people becoming addicted and then losing their livelihoods and whatever. So it's a slightly depressing subject to read about, but really, really fascinating. And I'm trying to remember what else I've read this year that I've really enjoyed.
While you're thinking, Empire of Pain was like in my top 10 books of last year. Oh, we lost Alison again.
No, I think we've lost it again.
Hang on in there. Slip of wine.
Well, I can, can't I?
There we go, you're still there.
I'm still here. You call me having a sip of wine.
That's fine. We won't judge.
Sorry, so I missed the last thing you said.
I said Empire of Pain was on my top 10 books of last year. I loved it.
Yeah, so well written that it made it such a compulsive read. Definitely. But yeah, so I'm reading a few rom-coms now because of doing the romance festival. I've read a few rom-coms, which I hadn't read any for quite some time, and it's been actually quite a joy to read them. Some of them are so good. So I read 12 Days by Neve Hagen, who's an Edinburgh writer that I know, and that's really excellent. And I've got her next book lined up. It's just come out, and it's called what's it called? The Breakup Clause. And that sounds really good. I'm really looking forward to that because it's about a woman who starts a new job, and she finds that she is boss to a man who is actually her husband. She married him in Las Vegas years before, and then she lost contact and they never got divorced. And now they work in an office together. So that one sounds an absolute treat. So I'm looking forward to that.
That does sound quite good. Are you going to be chairing any of the panels then at the festival? Or?
No, I'm leaving that to others. I haven't chaired things, and I'm not sure I'd be a brilliant chair. So we've got some people a bit more experienced to come and do the chairing. So
you only get the experience when you
by doing it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll take on some chairing in the future. So we will see.
This can be a good way of practicing because people help you out with questions.
Yeah, that's true. And I mean, also what we've done, so just in case any of our chairs can't make it, or if someone comes down with COVID, we've each chosen one panel to make sure that we read the books relating to that panel so that we can step in if any of the chairs suddenly have to drop out. We are prepared and can step in. So you never know. It might be just my luck that I get called upon on the day to do the chairing. In fact, so
That's
we'll see.
efficient planning. I've never thought of doing that.
Oh no, we suddenly thought, you know what, and actually, as it happens, there is going to be a train strike that weekend, of course, as luck would have it. So we suddenly thought, yeah, well, what if someone drops out, you know, and with COVID, people do drop out, they can't be helped. So we thought, right, we'll each read some of the book, you know, the books of a certain panel, so that we've got a little backup.
That's an excellent idea. You can still get around in a train strike, because I travelled in the last one. It was an exciting adventure, and I went to some places that I've not been before.
I know. I think
if you go with a book and you don't like have a specific time to be somewhere, it's absolutely fine.
That's true, and of course, people can always jump in their cars. Hopefully, you know, so. Hopefully, and you know, Edinburgh is a big city, and quite a lot of our authors are Edinburgh based, and quite a lot of our chairs are Edinburgh based, and a lot of our audience will come from Edinburgh. So we hope the train strike won't have too much effect, but it may just affect some people who are coming from further afield. So it's a great shame, but then, you know, I support the strikers and think they should get paid properly. So hopefully at some point this whole issue will be resolved satisfactorily.
Yeah, and I think you can't. I'm the same with that, and I think you can't. Just got to go with it, haven't you?
Yeah, we you know, put up with a bit of inconvenience, and hopefully at some point it'll all be sorted.
Maybe if I use the train every day for work, I might get a bit more annoyed. But
mind you, it always seems to be at the weekend now, which is you know, maybe it doesn't inconvenience the commuters so much, but it inconveniences people when they're trying to go to, you know, visit family or go to events. But there we are.
I was going to say they seem to pick it when it's big events, so maybe that's a compliment for your event.
Maybe there are some other bigger events happening elsewhere. Our little festival, I don't think, is on their radar. Be nice if it was.
You can pretend it is, though.
I think yeah, I'll take that thought and hold on to it.
But yeah, the last one was on the bank holiday weekend, and there's a really big festival in Leeds, like a music festival.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of music festivals, weren't there? And there have been quite a bit of disruption when there have been sporting events and big football matches and stuff like that. So
yeah, I think that was definitely timed to coincide with that one, because a lot of people move around.
Yeah.
For that.
Yeah.
Doesn't seem to stop people going though. Seem quite busy.
Well, I'd say, I mean, people find a way, won't they? And you know, people that are more local will always manage to get there somehow. So
we've got about 5, maybe just over 5 minutes left. I'll ask you a couple of our favourite book group questions, because this is your first time with us.
Right.
Your most memorable moments as an author?
Winning Pitch Perfect. That was, I mean, it's kind of like winning the X Factor. I mean, not as big, obviously it's not on television or anything like that, but it is that moment where you've gone up in front of a panel of judges to be judged and up against other people, and I couldn't have been more surprised to have won it. And that was just such an incredible moment that just set the whole thing in motion. I will just never forget that. And the euphoria afterwards.
Have you ever acted out a scene to help with the writing process?
Yeah, I think I've sort of like thought about like when I think I had one scene where Marnie was tied up and like what she could do without using her hands. I mean, I wasn't tied up because you know you can't do that to yourself, but just like in the position, you kind of put yourself in the position and like how could I, you know, how could my character stand up if their ankles are tied together, or how could she try and get a drawer open to try and get a knife when her hands are tied up, and could she open a drawer with her teeth? So yeah, you do try and act out little things like that.
Good answer. You can tell a lot about an author by asking that question.
So that was the right answer, I hope.
We've had much.
I've never tried out any of the murders. I have to hasten to add, I have not tried out any of the murders that I've written about. They're all imaginary.
If your books were adapted for TV, what character would you like to play?
Oh, what character would I like to play? Well, that's quite hard. So I'm a bit older than a lot of my characters, so I couldn't say that I'd like to play Marnie or I'd like to play Lexi. I might like to play one of the killers maybe, but I can't say too much about that without giving stuff away. So
yeah, no spoilers, definitely.
No spoilers, exactly.
So there you go. Last one of our favourite book group questions: would you make a graphic novel adaptation of one of your books?
I'd love to do that. I'd really love to do that. I think it would be so much fun to have a graphic novel done from one of the books. It would be fantastic, and I'd love to have a stab at writing that. I've never written graphic novels. I don't know how you. I sometimes think, I quite often think about it actually, thinking I'd really like to try that, but I don't know how you get into it. Whether you have to pair up with an illustrator from the start, or whether you just write lots of the little balloons of people speaking and describe the picture, and then maybe the publisher assigns an illustrator. I don't know, but I think it would be a great thing to do, and I'd love to do that. So if there are any illustrators out there looking for someone to write their graphic novel,
works really well for crime as well.
It does, and I know, so Denise Miner has done quite a lot of graphic novels, and I always think, God, that must be so much fun as a break from writing a sort of big, solid, chunky novel to actually then spend time writing a graphic novel. It must be a really lovely change of pace with the writing.
Yeah, she wrote a Hellblazer.
Yeah, and I think she did the Girl with the Dragon Tattoo graphic novels. She did the adaptation for them to be graphic novels, which if you are adapting from such a brilliant novel to start with, that also must be really great to
do. Yeah, I didn't know about those ones as much. I know the Hellblazer ones because my husband's a big fan of the.
Oh, right.
So we've got 3 minutes left. Remind people who have been watching and fascinated by stories of the Tattoo Thief and the other series. The Girls on Chalk Hill is the beginning one. Remind them what you write, what they're going to go away and buy.
Right, so I've got 3 series. I've got the Tattoo Thief series, which was my first series, which features young Francis Sullivan and 2 artists, Marnie Mullins, chasing serial killers through Brighton. Then the second series I did was the one with my brother, which is Death in Kabul and Death in Helmand, and they're set in Afghanistan, but they're not political. They are straightforward mystery thrillers, quite a lot of action, fantastic fun to write. I think they're really good fun to read. And then the most recent ones, which I've actually got here. So we've got the Girls on Chalk Hill and the Girls' Last Cry, and the third one will come in November. I have a website, which is alisonbelsham.com, and I'm on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, all under the name Alison Belsham. So you can find me. You can find all the books on Amazon, of course, and you can order them from your favourite independent bookshop. So please do that.
Yeah, definitely support the independent bookshops. An important thing to do. And then last thing to say is thanks so much for joining us, and best of luck with your literature festival.
Thank you so much for having me. I've really enjoyed it, and and yes, please also, if you like romance and women.
Oh, she's gone. But yeah, we will pass on the other things, Donna. Yeah, make sure you meet her and say thank you for attending as well.